Hi, everybody. Good evening. Welcome to the Finding You podcast. I am Dr. Brad Reedy. Today is Tuesday, July 15th, 2025. For those of you who might be new to our broadcast, this is our live Ask Me Anything broadcast where you can submit questions in advance by emailing them to info@findingyouprograms.com. That's info@findingyouprograms.com. If you are a Finding You alumni or an Inner Circle member, you can submit those questions during the live broadcast that you're welcome to attend. I should announce with our Finding You Inner Circle, that is inevitable. That's coming up in the next week or so. I've been announcing that for the last 2 or 3 months. So what that means is if you currently are a Finding You alumni, then you'll be automatically enrolled in this. You'll be invited to the live broadcasts and you'll have access to episodes that won't be available to the public. If you are not a Finding You alumni, that includes those of you who went through a Finding You program while it was Evoke Therapy programs. If you're one of those, you will not be automatically enrolled. It's a $10 subscription per month, $100 per year. It's something to help this fledgling company move itself along and publish these broadcasts. So before I get into the questions that have been pre-submitted, let me go over some of the announcements. My 2 books, The Journey of the Heroic Parent and The Audacity to Be You, are available both on Amazon and Audible. Our next available Finding You is July 23rd. That's just a week away. I should tell you that a spot opened up in it recently. Somebody had to cancel last minute. So we have now a spot available. So if you're looking to do that and you can make it work, July 23rd through July 27th. And officially, the last Finding You that I'll be facilitating for 2025 will be August 13th through 17th. So if you've been waiting to work with me, this is the last opportunity in 2025. August 13th through 17th is that offering. Then we have a September 3rd, October 1st, November 5th, and so on. You can find all those dates on our website. If you're looking for an attachment-based coach, an analytically informed coach or therapist, you can find us on our website. You can contact us there, or you can email us at our email, info@findingyouprograms.com. All other inquiries, any questions, any suggestions, or for private couple and family intensives, info@findingyouprograms.com. I'm so excited. This fall in Rhinebeck, New York at the Omega Institute, I'm going to be hosting a 5-day workshop entitled The Audacity to Be You. So if you're interested in a 5-day workshop to work with me, to work with my daughter Emma, in some sort of combination between lecturing, question and answer, but also some of the experiential activities that we do at our intensives, the Audacity to Be You workshop is that offering at the beautiful Omega Institute. So what that looks like is you go to eomega.org. That's eomega.org. Click on the workshops tab and then find the Audacity to Be You and sign up there. Like I mentioned, the Inner Circle, for those of you that are not Finding You alumni of our Finding You program, that means you've attended a program or you have a coach since October of 2024. If you're not, you don't qualify for that, then you won't get these announcements anymore. You won't get the invitations for these broadcasts anymore. So contact us at info@findingyouprograms to make sure that there's no lapse in your coverage. And also, it's a way to help support these broadcasts, like I mentioned. All right. With that, I'm going to get into the pre-submitted questions before I get into any of the live questions that audience members can submit. Somebody writes in and says, you say we're responsible for our own happiness. Is it wrong if you want to make your spouse happy? I understand my spouse's happiness is her responsibility, but I want to be happy, but I want her to be happy, and I want to contribute to that. The language is an issue here. There's some words that you use, and I don't like the idea of just challenging semantics, but as a therapist, language matters. What we say and the words that we choose matters. So let me say a couple of things. First of all, a colleague told me once that here in Utah, he had the LDS, the Mormon missionaries, knock on his door. And after kindly suggesting or telling them that he wasn't interested in their invitation to discuss more, one of the young missionaries said to him, do you want to learn how to be happy? And my friend, who is a therapist, said, I want to learn how to feel all of my feelings. So I think the idea of having her be happy can be a barrier to fulfillment, to connection, to what she might need. And again, I'm not just playing on words, but the goal is that she's allowed to feel everything or anything that she feels. If she has a loss, if she has something in her life that matters, that gets hurt or injured, it's very important. In fact, it's the other side of love, I would argue, for her to feel the pain and the loss and the grief of that. So So part of the question is that if it's the goal to be happy, sometimes you're going to be at odds with what really is her need, which is to be present with what is. Happiness is fleeting. Happiness is temporary. And I always have sort of joked tongue in cheek, if the goal is to be happy, then opium might be the answer, then heroin might be the answer. Then all of us should just use substances or escapism behaviors until our demise ultimately. But really, this work is about learning to be connected to something bigger, something more transcendent, to life itself. And it is often in our fight to be happy that we are at odds and at war with ourselves and with life. My daughter Emma once said that in a way, therapy is all grief work. And what she means is that part of what we're helping people do is feel the losses, the change that is them. Who are they becoming and who they were? And that so much of therapy is when we try to control the flow of the universe, of what's happening to us. We think that we have a better idea, and we find ourselves at war and swimming upstream, even at war with our own bodies and ourselves. So the first issue with your question is it's not the job to make her happy, but to be a support to help her go wherever she needs to go. That's my thought. And the second thing is, yes, we can contribute to our partners, our spouses, our children, our friends, the people around us. We can contribute to their lives, but that idea of contributing is not a guarantee, right? There's a difference, for example, between loving somebody and making somebody feel loved. There's a difference between giving a gift and trying to make somebody feel gratitude. So again, it's about being with them. Do you have the capacity to hold the space for them, to allow them to be who they are in that moment, to feel what they're feeling in that moment? So part of the question is the contribution. Fundamentally, ultimately, when I talk about this idea, it is that it's not my fundamental job to make my wife happy. When I think it is, I make both of us miserable. I try to control things. I get angry. I get exhausted. I want to give up, and vice versa, right? It goes the other way around. So part of what I've had to do is surrender. It's to let go of the idea of making anybody happy. That's really the first story in the journey of the heroic parent. When I was dealing with that student that I'm thinking of his real name right now, and I can't remember what I called him in the book. Adam is what I called him in the book. When I came to the conclusion, when he was sharing with me the very simple and beautiful grief that he felt for his mother who had passed away, it came to me in an instant that my job was to just be with him in his grief and his sadness. To love him was to allow him to feel what he was feeling. So in a lot of ways, and I think about this as a therapist and a father, I think my job is to not get in the way. I think that in therapy all the time. So much when I charge a little bit more than some people in Utah, of course, and I do of course coaching across the states and across the world. But part of what I justify to myself that where I earn that money is because of what I don't say, of what I don't do, where I don't try to control it. I don't think that I know. I don't think I have the certain answer for the client, but really I have questions. I have a different way of offering perspective. So yeah, it gets tricky. The minute that we get attached to a feeling in ourselves or in another person, we are at odds with what is, with the flow of the universe. Leonard Cohen said, if you don't become the ocean, you'll be seasick every day. In Taoism, we talk about the way. Right? In Buddhism, we talk about what is. Western thought, Western religion, even in theology sometimes, tries to aim itself towards something. Whereas this Eastern idea that I'm speaking of today is not to aim it, but to find out what it is and to go with it. That's what George Lucas was trying to teach in Star Wars using Joseph Campbell's work. He was using the Force to say it's not something that controls you, and it's not something that you control. It's something you kind of join, something that you learn to live with. You learn to let it move through you. And I think even people in organized religion can use that language to talk about their spiritual experience, because many people are having these kinds of spiritual experiences within all organized religions. So it's a great question, and it has in it many interesting thoughts. Speaking of religion, somebody writes in and says this: I was raised in a faith that expresses belief in life before birth. I've been learning more about Buddhism recently, which is a somewhat similar idea about reincarnation. I think both of these frameworks have the idea that some of our wounds or patterns of thought are carried into this life from before birth. When I've read your books and listened to the podcast, I often feel curious about this topic. For example, in The Audacity to Be You, you shared the story about being born a complete self and breaking off shards of ourselves as we absorb ideas from the big people around us. Do you have any personal experience or beliefs about whether we come to this life as a complete self or whether we arrive with some history already accumulated inside of ourselves? And ultimately, do you think it matters? I love this question. Since I saw this come in last week, I've been thinking about it all week. In fact, I was tempted to write some slides in answer to it because I could speak on this. This, by the way, is the kind of thing that I'll be talking about on those episodes that are just for the inner circle. Let me say a few things. Ultimately, where I am with this is it's a mystery. I don't know the answer. I don't know what happened before I was born, and I don't know what will happen after I die. Now, I have stories and metaphors that I gravitate toward to explain this mystery. I gravitate toward, for example, Buddhism and the idea that everything is connected, that we are all one, that there is no other. That whatever I am at birth is an accumulation of intergenerational transmission. It's a accumulation of genetics. It's set in the context of the zeitgeist, of the culture, of the time. And the way that I can make sense out of all that phenomenon is maybe through a story that is offered by organized religion or belief systems, but ultimately I embrace the mystery of it all. And for me, Buddhism, because it adds so little to what we know, because it adds so little to what we know, what we can see and sense in front of us, I gravitate toward that. When I die, my body, whatever is me, will go back to where it came from, in a sense, to the collective unconscious, to the earth, to the clouds, to the sky, to the sun, to the universe. And somebody who comes along sometime after me might have aspects of me in them, maybe because they're part of my family lineage, maybe because they're influenced by something that I did on this earth. Maybe it's because they come from the same ground that I died, the place that I was. I don't know what it means. And when I was younger, I looked to answer the question of the mystery with dogma, with a belief system. And now I think of spirituality and the purpose of religion in a historical sense. Is to use metaphor to describe something that is beyond words, beyond our capacity to comprehend. And the idea of a God, for me, doesn't really answer the question, because what came before God? Who created God? And if God is forever, then that's the same answer as the universe. So I don't know the answer to this question. And in terms of psychology, whatever story, whatever theology or dogma that one subscribes to explain what it means to be a baby Homo sapien, a human, is just that. It's just a metaphor. It's our poetic way of describing the indescribable, of answering the unanswerable. And while people struggle with uncertainty, with not knowing, I have learned to play in it. I have learned to delight in not knowing. I think I shared earlier this year that I was at a graduation for my son-in-law, graduating with his PhD, and there was in Santa Barbara there was a religious building, and on the front window, it had the question about living with uncertainty, and that they offered answers to the questions. James Hollis says that mental health is in large part can be understood by our ability to deal with uncertainty, with not knowing. And as I've grown older, I'm more comfortable with that than I used to. Not knowing doesn't mean that I've given up. It means that I keep searching for a poem, for a song, for an experience that feels transcendent to me, that describes something that is beyond description. I think that the great teachers of all religions used metaphors to describe these different layers and levels of consciousness. I don't think that religion is a history lesson or foretelling of the future or a description literally of the cosmos or of an individual's history. I think they are stories that explain something that is beyond explanation. The metaphor itself is just a glimpse into the void. So whatever we're born with, whatever comes with a baby, whether it's past lives, whether it's a different life that existed before this, I don't know. But what I know is that when presented with the baby and the child and the person in front of me, the question that I'm asking myself is, who are they in this moment? And the self is not a constant, right? It's not like who you are in this moment. You might be hungry later. You might be tired later. That doesn't mean you're a different person. That just means that the self is just who it's the self for me is answered by questions that start off with I think, I feel, I love, I like, I hate, I want, I don't like, I don't prefer, I prefer, I believe, I sense, I see, I hear. It's just the truth in a given moment. So I don't think of it dogmatically like that, which isn't to say that if you do that's wrong. It's just it's a different way of thinking about these questions for me. All right, here's another one. Someone says, "Can you please explain what you think is going on with the mental health expert community in advising policymakers about children being allowed to determine their sex before adulthood and parents' rights being questioned? Also in Canada, the MAID, Medical Assistance in Dying program, is actively discussing the availability of MAID to mature minors. Are there even mental experts who know the child's brain, that the child's brain involved in these decisions? I was understanding that many diagnoses cannot even be determined until a child reaches adulthood, which may be delayed due to the individual's own time schedule. For instance, personality disorders would not be diagnosed prior to age 18. How can this even be a consideration, knowing that children are not fully developed and are living with their parents for that very reason? Also, many kids have the other underlying issues that might distort their thinking. This is not political. I'm just grappling with how illogical and unscientific this is when we are talking about children. I am also trying to understand if there are mental health experts advocating for our children in this regard." You bring up again even though this is not a religious question, it is some of the unanswerable questions that we have to answer. If a child, for whatever reason, identifies as the gender that they were not assigned at birth, a parent has to make a decision one way or the other. If a government is trying to support people, they have to draw the line somewhere between parent rights, family rights, individual children's rights, and I don't know the answer. It's why I am so disinclined to think about politics and sociology, because I don't know how to think about groups of people. I only know how to think about individual people, what they're going through, their story, what's happening for them. I don't like dogma. I don't like psychological theory that feels like dogma. For me, each individual client, each individual session is a discovery. And if I am not unlearning and relearning new things as I go along, I don't think I'm doing my job. I don't think I'm living my life. And so I don't know the answers to these questions. I don't know, there's an old philosophical idea called the is ought question. This idea that we have some ability at times to see what is, but we are poor when it comes to answering the question, what ought to be? So I don't know what ought to be. For me, sometimes it's a best guess, and it's understanding that there are consequences either way, that we don't get to win, but we get to choose how to lose. And that's not a trite saying when it comes to big policy and political issues like this, political questions like this, societal questions like this. It's just a fact. You have to decide one way or the other, and both have consequences. And what I like about science and philosophy is that it's always evolving. Whereas some dogmas or religions or ideologies have all the answers, right? They've arrived. So there's no need for further inquiry. Whereas scientific thought is always results in developing the asking of more questions, of better questions. So your question to me almost feels like a rhetorical question in the sense that these are good questions. This is a good dialogue. This is something good to discuss, but I don't necessarily have answers to the questions. And I really appreciate you writing such a difficult and nuanced question. All right. My next question is quite long. It's a couple of pages. So let me get into it. Somebody writes, I am a woman with 2 grown sons. One is seemingly successful, age 27, and is living temporarily at our home with his fiancée until he finds a townhome. My other son is struggling and or finding himself and cannot live with us. He had been in wilderness and is nearly 21, and we have been supporting him while he was working since he chose not to attend any school after high school. Right now, he says he'll be going to a technical school, which we will support, mainly because that is our boundary since he does not make enough to support his standard of living. But I know that anything he says has a 50-50 likelihood of happening. My husband has always traveled, so I have raised the kids and disciplined them, and I was very close to the kids, and now my older son has nothing in common with me, and my younger son is self-involved. My husband has a health issue which he can't do too much about except eat healthily, exercise, and live a clean life. He constantly records what ingredients are in the meal, and I make to better something. I cook for him all his meals and encourage him without pushing him. He goes 2 or 3 different exercise places each day, which can be hours away. He also talks to our older son in lieu of talking to me, since he is living with us and they have a lot in common. I cook for my husband for his health, all meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And since my son is here with his fiancée, they are invited to eat. They never say thank you or help with the dishes. One day I kept them up with putting away pots and pans because I was not home in an evening. My son complained that is when I told him he could have done the dishes and then it wouldn't be an issue. Anyway, he seems to have the answer all the time. This time it was they aren't his dishes. But then later he did do some dishes and it seemed to help a bit. I told my husband he pretty much has been ignoring me for a month and he is making himself the priority. I get that he's concerned about his health, but it's like I am just a servant in the house. No one even talks to me. My older son is with his fiancée all the time, and they watch shows they enjoy with my husband. I do the dishes while this happens. I am choosing what to say since they will be moving out soon, and much of this will not be an issue, although it gives me pause. I also see my aging mother once a week and take her to the doctors. Sometimes she is grateful, but many times she just complains and compliments the people around her who do not help her. I realize she is aging and that is hard. I leave when I can't take it anymore. Lately, the hardest thing is helping her with her decisions, since she wants you to help her, but she still wants to be in total control, which is a difficult balance at 89. I am grateful for my sisters who help with my mother and are good people to talk to when I'm feeling frustrated. I'm realizing that some people just have no clue that they are taking advantage of people. When I can't take it anymore, I eventually call out the behavior in a nice way, and the reaction from my family is that there is something wrong with me. I actually told my husband if I didn't tell him what I was thinking, he would never have a clue and would keep acting in an inhumane way. I tried to reach my younger son by phone since my husband was having trouble contacting him, and my younger son told me he only responds to people on his own time and he was busy. I simply said, okay, then please return your father's call on your own time. He needs to speak with you. I am pondering whether I should not answer my younger son's phone calls that are usually dramatic emergencies, but I probably won't do that. I guess I am struggling with what I think are totally non-empathetic or compassionate people in my own immediate family. It seems like there is no appreciation and that they are all looking out for themselves. I realize I need to look after myself, and I do try to do things that help with my frustrations. However, it seems like the only way I see a change is to call out another's, what I call inhumane behavior, which the people with inhumane behavior may or may not want to see or believe. I asked my husband if we could just go to dinner on the weekend without our son and fiance, and asked for it twice, and he ended up making reservations for all of us. It's like I'm not being heard. My husband did seem to realize that he had abandoned his relationship with me, and he said he'd do better, but this is a pattern. Are the people that don't see how they are behaving and never look critically at themselves? I can't understand how my children are like this when I influence them otherwise to be my own lived example. I feel very disillusioned with the current time of what my children have become. At the current time of what my children has become. To me, they are pretty self-involved, and my husband is too. I know I can work on myself, saying it's not me, it's what is going on with a certain time in my kids' development. My husband is dealing with health. I rely on my faith to move on, not sweat the small stuff and forgive. However, I'm beginning to feel like an outsider in my own family and that I truly wouldn't be missed until I pass into the next world. I only get better behavior when I speak out for myself, but it doesn't feel like anyone really cares about me. I think that that's what I am trying to say. It seems like the people in my family only change their behavior when I speak out and have had enough. They never look around and see that someone might be wanting to feel included or be helped out. If I have to always advocate for myself, then how much does my family really care about me? I'm concerned that I might give up on this one-way relationship. I want to do something to keep it going since I am hopeful. It is just a huge bump in the road. Any advice? I'm beginning to feel worn down, and I don't think the people closest to me even care or listen to me. Thank you for that. That's a lot of good context and background and several good examples. I appreciate it. You know, my first thought is what I might say to you as a thought experiment is to assume that nobody is going to change, or at best they will temporarily change and then go back to the status quo. And then the question is, now what are you going to do about that? I think what happens in these kinds of situations is that you're expecting them to do for you you're expecting them to do something for you that is your responsibility, which is to take care of yourself. My experience is the better that you take care of yourself, the more likely you are to be surrounded by people who notice your needs, listen to you, and attend to you. And the more quote unquote selfless you become, the more you are around people who don't treat you like a self, like a person. I this question is a story for almost everybody that I've worked with in therapy at some point. It is the realization that nobody's going to save you from this equation, but you. And that while it's interesting to see how your children and your husband are organizing themselves around you, what's really fascinating is why do you put up with it? Why do you allow it? Nobody's coming to save you. The person that is going to save you is yourself. My son was just telling me over the weekend, I was talking to him. We found these cards where we were asking questions for discussion. We were taking turns. I saw it on the internet and ordered it, and we played with it one night last week as a family. I would just pick a card one at a time and ask a question of each person. And my son, after several days later, he said, I thought about one of the questions. And he told me a story, which I won't get into the details of, but the story was about how somebody said something to him. Somebody that he respected said something to him. that for a long time he held resentment towards, until he realized they were just being them. It was his job to push back. It was his job to say no. It was his job to step into the void, if you will, to face his fears, to go against, to rebel, to not assume that the authority figure that he respected was right. But that authority figure was just, in a sense, parroting what they had learned to say in that particular role. So for me, there's an old saying that when we repeat something to the people around us and they don't seem to be getting it, it might not be them that is the slow learner. In other words, it's us. So for me, this is your work. This is not theirs. They're just being them and getting away with what they can get away with. And I don't even judge them for it. It is that you're wanting something back from them, but you're expecting them to give it to you as a result of what you give to them. Gratitude, appreciation, consideration. You have to demand it. You have to require it. The Dance of Anger by Harriet Lerner, for me, is a wonderful book. I also loved the book Iron John about male healthy masculinity, and the idea that people weren't going to give us the key that unlocks the prison that we find ourselves in. We're going to have to steal it. I have found that the more I take care of myself, and it's difficult. I am a people pleaser. I am a codependent. I am one who does everything that you described here. So it goes against my nature, my training, my mother tongue, if you will. But that is what I'm confronted with. That is what you are confronted with. You're confronted with yourself. You have to become something that you aren't, something that maybe you were taught that you shouldn't be. You have to become that which you were told was actually bad and wrong. It's going to feel self-centered. It's going to feel empty. It's going to feel transactional to you at first. It's going to feel all wrong. But eventually, when you change, the people around you change, meaning that they either adjust or they're not the people around you anymore. It's like that quote that I love attributed to John Lennon, where he said, if you tell the truth, you won't have a lot of friends, but you'll have the right ones. But you expecting and hoping that they will change, that's the disease, not the cure. The fact that you have to say it and they change temporarily, that's the problem. It is mentally healthy, or within the range of mental health, to ask for your needs to get met. It is unhealthy to demand that your needs be met. So ultimately, if your environment doesn't support you, you have to change your environment. And I'm not advocating for people getting divorced and going no contact with their family at the first sign of inconvenience or of difficulty or conflict. I'm not talking about that. I'm saying this pattern that you have is more about you than it is about them. So if you were my client, first of all, I wouldn't say any of this. If you were my client, I would take it a lot slower. But ultimately, I would have you build your life that is meaningful, that is a richer life. I would encourage you to take care of your needs first. In essence, I would encourage you in some ways to follow their lead. Because love is not a thing that we give and hope for something back. Love is something we give without strings attached. What that suggests is that in order to love, we have to feed ourselves first. Otherwise, we are giving something with an expectation of something in return, even if it's something as harmless as what we might call gratitude. But it's not working. And they're not interested in your philosophy. They're not interested in this way of living with you anymore. The Dance of Anger would be a good place to start. Somebody writes and says, my son has been home from treatment for 5 months now. We moved to a different state so he could have a fresh start, away from friends who are struggling with substance abuse. He is self-isolating and not doing any of the things that will help his mental health. He has been smoking weed and vaping. He hates where we live and talks about going back to California often. 2 days ago, he punched a hole in the wall and said that every day he doesn't go back to California, he'll punch another hole in the wall. which he did, in fact, punch another hole in the wall the next day. He wouldn't threaten me physically. I was non-reactive. I did leave the house because he was scaring the dog. I have an excellent parent, coach, therapist who I just had a phone call with 2 days ago before my son punched a hole in the wall. I've been working on my relationship with my son, listening to him without judgment or offering advice, and not policing or spying on him like I used to. My son will turn 18 in 7 months. I think that his wilderness therapy program in Idaho was the best therapy he ever had. I'm considering him going back to wilderness therapy if he gets worse or if his life is in danger. We have only 7 months left until he is 18. What is the difference between teen wilderness therapy and young adult wilderness therapy? Our relationship is damaged from being forced to go to wilderness and residential treatment, so I would probably only send him to wilderness if his life was in danger. I think I actually had answered this question, but I'll answer it again because I might even have a different take or a different flavor for my answer today. There's no right decision here. There's only your decision. I mean, that's the difference between kind of codependency and recovering codependency, if you will. Is that codependency is looking for the right answer and non-codependency is looking for your answer. So you get to decide what your limit is, where your line is. The thing about the relationship being damaged, being forced to go to wilderness, it doesn't sound like the relationship is thriving right now. It sounds like the relationship is already ruined. If somebody in the house is being violent and intimidating and ruining my property, and the only way that I can get along with them is to accommodate that behavior, then I suppose I'm not even in the equation. I don't think your blind spot is the capacity to hold space. I think your blind spot is the other side of the equation, which is prioritizing you, living your truth, even as a father or a mother, even as a parent. So for me, everything you're saying makes sense. It's okay to send him back. It's okay to send him to this thing about children not forgiving us for what we do. If that's the measure, if that's the way we live our lives, we are really asking the child to parent us. And I know it's nuanced because I encourage so much of listening and tuning into the child. But if that task goes all the way toward they have to forgive, they have to like what I did. I mean, the number of things that I have done wrong to my children is innumerable. And that's true for everybody listening to my voice who has a teenager. The number of mistakes that we make is you can't count them. So part of what we do is just we show up with that humility. We show up with that humanness. We try to work on ourselves. We try to evolve, to change, to heal, but you're never going to get it perfect. Remember, therapy, this kind of therapy, isn't about improving yourself so that you are beyond reproach. This kind of therapy is learning to accept who you are, which does change you. And if he is beyond your ability to feel peace and serenity and feel okay, you're allowed to make whatever decisions, to draw whatever lines in the sand that you want. And so I also want to say one last thing about this, because I have these kinds of questions before. The thing about it is, here's the thing. You've given him plenty of psychoeducation, psychological training and intervention. You've had him at a wilderness therapy program and at a residential treatment center. So at some point, the next phase is, depending upon the level of risk that he's at, which you get to decide and I don't, is the next phase is it's his life. Ultimately, in every relationship, there comes a point where we have to let go. Now, it's not when they're 12 or 8 or maybe even 16 or 17, but eventually. And for me, it happened before 18 in some respects with my children. I think it's maybe because my children are like me. They're especially willful. and they're willing to go to the mat to prove their independence of me, from me. So I can get into that cycle of escalating kind of warfare, or I can let go. It's messy. There's lots of mistakes. There's lots of issues. But ultimately, what the mantra that I tell myself every day, from my 32-year-old down to my 17-year-old and the two in between, is it's not my life. And I'm sorry for how my humanness impacted you negatively. I believe you. I believe you. I believe it's hard to be my child, my son or daughter or child. I believe that. I believe my personality is tough to live with sometimes. And I don't say that to dismiss any of your feelings. I say that to accept them. So it sounds like you've done a lot, and it sounds like you might be drawing close to another decision, and I support you either way. Thank you. Somebody writes in and says, even when we respond to our dysregulated child in a healthy way, we may somaticize the suffering inflicted, and it will come up as physical pain or anxiety. This is aligned with what was taught by Gabor Mate and Bessel van der Kolk. What techniques do you support that can help us move through trauma out of our bodies? Well, my preferred tool is talk psychotherapy. That's my preferred tool. Now, I also believe in somatic therapy, right? Focusing on the body. I believe that psychedelic assisted psychotherapy can be fantastically transformative. I believe in experiential therapies like psychodrama, which we do at our intensives. I believe in participating in psychoeducation and group experiences like AA and Al-Anon and Codependence Anonymous. I think there are a lot of ways, but I don't, it's, some people are kinesthetic learners. Some people are, like me, are verbal focused. Some people do better by experiencing it in the body. Some people like a combination. You are absolutely right that if we can't experience, if the feelings get stuck in us and we can't move through them, I move through them personally. If you're asking me, I move through them by talking to a safe, compassionate, accepting other, non-judgmental other. That's how I move through it. When somebody asks me, or when I ask somebody, how do you feel? I'm not just looking for the information about how they feel. I'm not just answering the question when I get asked about how I feel. I'm feeling it. The description of how I feel is in part me feeling. I also, in the past 5 years or so, I have a more somatic experience of my feelings. I have multiple sclerosis. Some of you might not know that. It's very, very well managed. I was diagnosed with it in 2015. And I believe that part of it is the stress, the anger, the pain, the codependency, the anxiety that is in my body that I haven't moved through. In the past 5 years, I've experienced my emotions as something that happens in my body, not just in my head. So I've even evolved my own approach. So anything, my answer is keep looking. And if you're asking me what I prefer, I really like talk therapy. Let me say one thing about talk therapy that doesn't get said enough. Talk therapy is not just the talking. Talk therapy is the re-experiencing of yourself. If I go to my therapist and tell her how I feel about her, about last week's session, I am taking the risk of telling the authority figure in my life how I feel, even if those feelings are disagreeable. And if she does respond, and she does, in an empathic, adult way, not justifying, not gaslighting, not telling me I misunderstood, not telling me it's my depression or my anxiety or my thinking error, but she listens, she does the adult thing and says, she's sorry, I can see it that way, I'll try to do better next time. That's an experiential intervention. Yes, it happened through talking, but the experience of talking to somebody different than my parents, different than the big people, the authority figures in my life, and when they respond, if I'm lucky enough to have a more mature, evolved, grounded, aware, and conscious response, I change inside. I become different. In essence, that becomes the childhood that I did not have, and the therapist becomes the parent that I did not have. That's not about the exchange of information. That's about the relationship. So when people say experiential therapy is a way to get into the unconscious stuff, to me that just means that they don't understand that even the most intellectual kind of therapy is an experience. I'm taking the risk that what will happen to me when I tell somebody my feelings, especially if my feelings are about them, I'm taking the risk that what will happen to me in this new experiment is the same thing that happened to me when I was a child, which was my mother and my father couldn't carry anything. So all of my feelings were attributed to my pathology, my immaturity, my problems, my issues. You see, they couldn't carry their own inadequacy. They hadn't done enough work to accept their own limitations, their own humanness. So I had to carry it. Conversely, as a parent, if I can make peace with my horrible, rotten self, that is with who I am, with my humanness, then my children don't have to carry it. When they are mad at me, I don't make it about them. I hear it. I understand it. I get out of my own head. I lose my mind, if you will, and see the world through their eyes and respond, if I can, compassionately. And that changes them. Because that's how Homo sapiens are built. They're built in relationship to other Homo sapiens. So, yes, wonderful questions. To get trauma out of our bodies, there's lots of ways to do it. EMDR, brain spotting, somatic experiencing, psychedelics, group therapy, education. I prefer psychoanalytic informed therapy, attachment-based therapy. That's my preference, both as a practitioner and as a participant. But I don't assume that everybody's going to be drawn toward the same technique, the same experience that I am. Even this podcast, for me, is an experience. When clients say to me, I felt seen, when I get emails or letters from people, that's profound to me because I don't know who they are. I'm not talking about them, but I'm giving them the experience that they're not alone. I'm showing up in a way that makes them feel seen and understood, connected to the greater humanity. That's why talk therapy means so much, and I find it to be so effective because it's more than just the information that is exchanged. All right, that looks like all the questions for this evening. Thank you guys for the questions you sent in. My 2 books, Journey of the Heroic Parent, Audacity Be You, are available on Amazon. We have a spot that just opened up in our July 23rd Finding You Intensive. That'll be run by my daughter, Emma. She is beyond amazing. Not just because she's my daughter, but she may be, as somebody once told me, she actually might be the A team and I might be the B team. But if you prefer me, August 13th is the last Finding You Intensive that I will be running in 2025. Go to our website for more dates. September 3rd is almost full, actually. September dates, I think, only has 1 or 2 spots left in it. October 1st, November 5th, December 3rd. And then, of course, our next online offering is to be determined. If you want a therapist or a coach that works in this model, contact us on our website or email us at info@findingyouprograms.com. If you want to find out about intensives, private offerings, info@findingyouprograms.com. If you're interested in attending a 5-day workshop, October 12th through 17th, go to the Omega website. It's a wonderful, beautiful facility, a couple of hours outside of the city, up the Hudson in Rhinebeck, New York. Go to eomega.org, click on the workshops and the Audacity Be You. It's about $500 for 5 days. So a wonderful, wonderful value if you're interested in working with me. My next broadcast will be this Thursday, 2 days from tonight. I'm going to be talking about how we do relationship works with families and with couples in therapy. What is its role? Versus, in contrast, I'm talking about individual work, individual therapy. That's this Thursday, July 17th at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Any questions, any requests, any book suggestions, topic suggestions, You can always email me at info@findingyouprograms.com. Thank you for all of you who attended, who submitted questions. Thank you for those of you who submitted questions in advance. For and on behalf of the people that you love and the people that love you, thank you for doing your work. It makes all the difference in the world. I hope this is a helpful point of contact. Have a great evening, and I'll talk to you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.